Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Conquer the Clutter podcast for the 17th of April. Today, we really have set a goal for ourselves. So we may run over a little because I do want this whole segment that I'm going to begin today to be part of the recording on the website so that when you go back, you've got a complete set. And I have some good news that I will announce about podcasts on the website. So, over the next many podcasts, we're going to work our way through a series of very common mental health challenges that carry with them both physical health side effects and mental health side effects, obviously. A few of which you may be experiencing currently or have experienced, or they come back and forth intermittently. All right, not unknown. I'm going to coach you on how to use a very user-friendly, portable, effective strategy called CBT. CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. But it is something that you can do for yourself effectively once you learn how. It isn't all that difficult. It follows some assumptions and it follows a logical series of a process. All right. And the reason I feel really strongly about this is that I've discovered a little book. It's going to be what we work from. Of course, added to that will be my clinical experience as it relates to clutter, hoarding, or any of the comorbidities. All right. So, CBT, as I started to say, stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. But as I said a minute ago, please just take a deep breath because it is something that you can apply to yourself. You don't necessarily need a therapist to do a really great job. The reason that I feel so strongly about doing this very extensive series is because no one has to be left behind. If you're not in a mood that is positive enough day in, day out, you don't necessarily need a therapist. Maybe you do, but you don't necessarily. There are things that you can learn to do for yourself to pull yourself out of a downturn earlier. So I don't want to see anybody left behind because they don't have a therapist or they don't have the funds to hire one, even if one is available. All right. Now, we're going to look at what CBT is and how best to use it. And the purpose in doing that is so that you will learn how to engage all parts of yourself, right? Because nobody understands you the way you understand yourself. You should always be, and you need to always be, your own strongest advocate. We're going to practice how to engage. It's very difficult to address any challenge, even easier ones, if you don't first engage yourself effectively. And remember, you can go back and you can listen to the most recent podcasts free of charge as often as you want until you really get the strategies under your control. And yay, Braden, he is going to post the most recent podcasts first, starting now. All right. And then the backlog that still is waiting to join the library, he will be moving those forward as Buzzsprout, the host site, gives us access to do that. But the most recent ones are going to be added first. I passed along your feedback, and he said he was happy to change the way he was doing it. Okay. So if you find something particularly interesting and you want to review it however many times you need to, it will be a whole lot easier very, very soon. These past 2 to 3 weeks, people have started to raise a very similar issue in their life in the counseling sessions that I'm doing. And it is something that has come to my attention intermittently, but it was kind of like a fleeting awareness. But there was a pattern in this last 2 to 3 weeks that I just couldn't miss. All right. And that is the burden of guilt that people carry. They guilt themselves into a hole that they can't get out of. And then, as a consequence of that, they get stuck. Guilt has two things attached to it: regret and shame. Right? Neither one of those is useful. So, after we get a little bit of skill with strategies attached to CBTing yourself, excuse me, the first thing we're going to talk about after that is how to engage and start to deal. Use the engagement process, get that down under your belt, and then use it to start to deal with shame, regret, and guilt. If that's something that's been burdening you, I want you to be reassured help is on the way. Olivia Telford and I are going to team up for the next quite a few weeks to work through that process because guilt is complicated. All right. So then we're going to look at how to deal with criticism. None of us are exempt from receiving criticism, and quite often it's really hard to hear. And sometimes we do some pretty ineffective things with it. So, right after shame, guilt, and regret comes how to deal with criticism. Because really, isn't that what you're doing to yourself when you swallow guilt? Isn't that really what you're doing to yourself? All right. After shame, guilt, regret, criticism, this is a sequence so that by the end of this, we have this whole package dealt with. And it's on the website in the library for you to go back and refresh anytime any one of these gets a jump on you. Okay, so it'll be a way for you to reboot getting back on track. So after the topics I just mentioned, we're going to look at how to stay in the moment using strategies from mindfulness practice. All right. Avoiding going down old paths that are unhealthy and aren't going to lead you anywhere you want to be or need to be is going to require that in that moment of decision, you need to stay engaged in this moment, not the moment that's leading you down the tunnel of darkness. All right. So rather than adding to our burden by dragging the past along with us like a bag of boulders, all right, learning to stay in the moment, to catch yourself and not go down that path is going to give you the choice to activate something that you're going to learn how to use rather than choose an old option that was never serving you well. If we haven't learned from our past by now, we're not going to. Check your birth date. All right. If you haven't learned how to learn from the past, it's not going to start spontaneously. So right now, I'm going to ask you, anytime you bump your head on the past, leave it in the past. I have a granddaughter named Olivia. When she was about maybe 8, she bought me a t-shirt. All right. And the t-shirt says, "Don't look back, Granny, you aren't going that way." All right. So when we have better skills at CBTing ourselves, we'll start to address how we can apply those skills and strategies to one of the most common mental health challenges in this whole world, and that is depression and anxiety. If either one of those is something that you deal with, know that you will want to attend this complete series. If you have to miss anything before the next series, the next week, go back and watch the podcast in the library. Braden's going to get it there. Once we've done that, we're going to go back and visit an old friend. All right. We're going to go back and look at our old friend, procrastination. But this time we're going to look at it through the lens of CBT. Now, I'm trusting that by this time, because you haven't heard me repeat it often enough, that you've invested in getting Jane Burka and Lenora Ewan's book, Procrastination. If you haven't, you may want to do that before we get to our CBT podcast on procrastination. There is nothing about procrastination that is not best put in Jane Burka and Lenora Ewan's book, Procrastination, Why You Do It and How to Stop Now. Then we're going to look at sleep. All right. Now, why would we bother looking at sleep? All right. Why? Why should we look at that? Because we need to work really, really hard to adjust our sleep habits so that we can incorporate healthy sleep, which is fundamental to positive, healthy physical and mental health. Why? Because it's one of the key foundation pieces in the energy that we need to have available to deal with whatever troubles us. And it largely is the foundation piece, the fundamental required piece to give us the strength to persevere. Just because we learn a few strategies, just because we get pretty good at them, doesn't mean that that's the whole story. We also need to take care of ourselves physically. And one of the most fundamental key elements is healthy sleep, right? So I hope to see each and every one of you and everybody else you know who can benefit from this series joining in. The support is going to be extensive. So remember that these are user-friendly tools and strategies. You don't have to be a mental health professional to use them effectively. I can't say that enough. You just need to be ready and willing to invest in yourself right now. I want you to take out your paper and pens, and I want you to put down one choice of, yes, I'm ready. No, I'm not. Haven't made up my mind. I want you to make that decision right now, and I want it to occupy space. I want it to be in your handwriting that you're making a commitment to your availability. Okay, so let's get started. So you've probably heard about CBT, and no, it isn't an oil. All right. So CBT and where it comes from is an old story. So why should we make the effort to get even competent at applying CBT strategies? Because they make sense. They're a really user-friendly way to make sense of what is confounding you. Now, you have frequently heard me say that it's rarely the event itself that hurts us. Okay. And if you really, really, really think about it, what really hurts us is the meaning we apply to it. Now, I think in a few podcasts back, I said this, so I'm going to repeat it. When I'm a mental health professional, I've been a mental health professional longer than I want to admit. And when I first heard this statement, that it isn't really usually the event that hurts us, it's the meaning we apply to it. I remember thinking to myself, are you out of your ever loving mind? Of course, it's the event that hurts us. And then I said, just put yourself on pause. Take your own advice, Elaine. Take a step back. Okay, deep breath. Think about this. Let's track it through the next few challenges that you have. And let's see if that's true. And you know what? I learned something. The point at which I started to feel pain, confusion, disoriented a little bit, like I wasn't playing my A, B, or C game any longer, was the point at which I applied a narrative, usually from the past, and I gave it a meaning. Up until that time, it was just facts. It was just a picture of facts that had happened. It's true. So you want to catch yourself with the narratives that you're telling yourself almost automatically. All right? Okay. It is true that our genetics is one factor, one potential factor in acquiring hoarding disorder, right? So genetics is a big factor in all of our lives. It's the shape of our nose, the shape of our ears, the color of our eyes, okay, our physical resemblance to others. All right. That's injustice. There's injustice in it. I'm just going to take a little aside for a moment. It seemed grossly unfair to me recently that my sister, who I was taking care of in the long-term care facility, she's been diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's. All right, is built like my baby finger, always has been. All right. And she can eat anybody, all right, out of vanilla ice cream. In fact, it has become, there's no justice because I like ice cream, but I don't even have to go near it before I start to swell. All right, so we developed a little strategy. This is what I'm talking about. All right. If it isn't working, put yourself on pause and ask yourself, be creative. What's the worst that can happen? She wasn't eating. This is an example of what I'm talking about, but I am taking a personal aside. She wasn't eating. She wouldn't eat. Oh, she doesn't like to eat. You've got to get her to eat. You've got to get her to eat. So I said, get the vanilla ice cream. Oh, well, the vanilla ice cream's for dessert. It'll come later. And I'm thinking to myself, rigid thinking, get the vanilla ice cream. We get the vanilla ice cream. And I take this stuff that would be really hard to identify because it's all ground up. And I put that on the spoon. And I know that's not going anywhere. Old ideas. And I dip it into a healthy little daub of vanilla ice cream, which will be the first thing to hit her lips. And she finishes everything. So let's learn from being creative. Be creative yourself. Take a few chances. What's the worst that can happen? All right. It's true that our genetics, our temperament, our environment, and our upbringing, the rules we were given to live by, they do shape the basics that we were born with, as far as our personality is concerned, anyway. They're key building blocks. It's true, but they're not the only blocks. Some of us were born more optimistic than others, but nobody gets, I don't get, you don't get 100% of the good stuff. That's not why somebody is able to pull themselves out of a downturn. And life has a way of influencing us to protect ourselves against the negatives. How? Okay, it's almost a genetic reset, operating from a negative bias. We've talked about that before. It's a protective mechanism, right? But it isn't the only show in town. And it doesn't have to be the first thing you try, even if it is the first thing that for a while continues to come to your mind. How can your brain be both a good friend and a not so good friend at the same time? Do you know how? It's simply through the stories we tell ourselves about what has happened. The story is neutral, it's just details. The meaning we apply to it loads it, right? Because we aren't very good at just observing situations as they really occur and taking a step back before we engage. Usually, our more normal default would be to engage in a way that protects us. What about just staying neutral and seeing what the options are before you decide to take the self preservation path? Okay. Especially when they involve someone or something that we particularly care about. Our brains are very, very quick to impose some kind of meaning to any event. And it is a huge habit we form on top of that. Right? Even if it leaves us feeling worse, it almost feels like an irrepressible urge, like it is the next logical step. It isn't. It became the next logical, normal step. And we built that into a pattern, which we now believe is reality. No. All right. It's just become an overriding habit that we've developed. Our brain is supposed to be working solely for our benefit. Once we understand how it works, and we've done a segment on that, right, we can start watching out for that negative bias. Sometimes we will want to apply it after we've put ourselves on pause for a second or two and we've done a better assessment of where we actually want to end up. Not end up where the negative bias took us and then do a lot of backstrokes out of it. Undo a lot of negative hurt, a lot of negative thinking, a lot of coming down on ourselves, a lot of old habits. What would it cost you today, right now, today, to practice before it's a loaded event, just on the little things? Put yourself on pause for 5 seconds. It will feel like an eternity. All right, really, it will. And ask yourself, what are my options? Where do I want to end up? What looks like the best choice? Try making some new friends among those choices. All right. And one of them, I'm hoping, will be that you intervene sooner applying CBT strategies. Now, I know I've said a lot about CBT strategies. What's in it for you? Why would you do this? You know why you do it? To take back more control over your own thoughts. That way we don't end up having to undo a lot of misguided meaning or impressions that we formed or habits we've repeated that didn't work for us the last time anyway. We can put ourselves on pause. 5 seconds is all it's going to take for you to ask, what other choices do I have? While we make a conscious choice. 5 seconds. That's 1 steamboat, 2 steamboats, 3 steamboats, 4 steamboats, 5 steamboats. It will feel like an eternity, but that's how long it takes. Okay. And check situations out against the apparent obvious facts. Now, sometimes it takes longer to say all of that than it does to do it. In life, we all also have to work from and watch out for our assumptions. You know the old adage, watch out assumptions because it will make an ass of you and me. All right. Okay. Anybody who thinks that they don't gravitate toward assumptions isn't really thinking things through. really needs to slow down their thinking and follow the trail of breadcrumbs to the meanings that you as an individual, me as an individual, are more susceptible to. Okay. And the more susceptible we are to them, the more likely we'll incorporate them into what we think is reality. In fact, we create our own reality in large part. Okay. There are many ways we end up creating our own reality, and we do it by just working from assumptions and being on autopilot. 5 seconds. What other options do I have? Every type of therapy, every type of mental health assistance is based on a set of assumptions. All right, that's just facts. Now, you can think of these assumptions as a kind of a method of how our human mind will work them and the theories. Okay, and here are the assumptions of CBT. The first is that depression, anxiety, stress, and habits are largely caused and sustained by our core beliefs. Have you asked yourself, when things aren't working, what was the core belief of mine behind that? And those beliefs we hold about ourselves, all right, whether they would check out against the facts and reality or not, we hold them dearly. In fact, we repeat them. They become shortcuts. And when anything becomes a shortcut, a go-to, a default, an automatic, semi-automatic even, you have to know that that concept, that belief, just cannot be appropriate for that many different situations. It can't be. Mathematical impossibility. So what does it make them? It makes them thinking errors. That's what it makes them, right? And this is the second assumption that CBT is based on. This gives us an irrational negative belief about ourselves, because most of the time we end up in a safe place, maximum benefit, a safe place, all right, feeling protected but not happy. So those negative beliefs we start to apply to ourselves, or we apply them to others. Sometimes we apply them to the world we live in. It's just, world's gone crazy. Ever heard anybody say, "Oh, what happened in the world? It's just gone crazy." The world has always been crazy. All right. The world has always been crazy. There are too many different factions all fighting for space. That is not a recipe for success. Cooperation is, well, seems to be not high on the agenda these days. Anyway, let's make cooperation with all parts of ourselves something, a gift we give ourselves. So we start to tell ourselves stories, all right, that make us unhappy. We're comforted in some way because these automatic behaviors, these automatic beliefs are comfortable. We're used to them. They're common ground, but we're unhappy. We're anxious. At a minimum, we're dissatisfied. All right, here I am again. Didn't like it last time. How did I get here? I was on autopilot. That's how I got here. I didn't stop in the moment and ask myself, what other options do I have? Using the same thinking errors over and over. All right. Now, in previous podcasts, we've talked about the 11 problematic thinking styles. I won't go through them today, but we will go through them next week. Again, if you need a review. If you need a review, put it in the chat. If you don't need a review, you know what they are. All or nothing thinking, that starts us. Know this for sure. The way we see our world, definitely. affects our behavior. All right. Because that is the measure of the likelihood of progress or success. If anybody has unmuted themselves, would they mute themselves now, please? Okay, thank you. All right. And the other thing it does is it limits the choices we give ourselves. Let's do that again. The way we see our world, whatever we decide it is, definitely is going to affect our behavior because it affects the choices we let ourselves see. And it limits those choices. All right. It limits the ones we allow ourselves. It's possible to discover, though, our destructive thoughts and change them if we give ourselves that 5-second pause. Just because we have a habit of repeating these habits doesn't mean they're right. All right. It just means that's the first place our mind goes to, out of habit. All right. Do you want to be a trained SEAL, or do you want to be the best that you can be? Because those other choices are out there. Now ask yourself, right now, papers and pen, please. Can you see habits in your life right now that repeat themselves? Can you write down at least one that is a dominant one that you're aware of? Or if you haven't actually peeled it back that far, ask yourself this. Are there situations that repeat themselves? Write down the situation, one or two of the situations that repeat themselves. Because behind that is the habit. Behind that is the belief about yourself, the belief about your place in this world, your world. And behind that, what you believe you're worth. And I'm betting that if it's not working that well for you, 9/10 of that is automatic. And you know what? It came from somewhere else. It doesn't belong to today. You know how I know that? Because I see you every week trying to find a better way. That's how I know it. I'm sure that everybody, even sleeping in, all right, would be preferable to listening to me drone on. That was a joke. But same choices, same patterns, same results. Okay. Are you willing at this point to do one thing? To question whether repeat is because you keep taking the same path. And by taking that same path frequently, you're warping your perception of things. Unwittingly, it's resulting in something called, write this one down, cognitive distortions. That's like being at the zoo. And you go through those, whatever they are, and you're looking at the mirrors, the crazy mirrors. That's what a cognitive distortion is. And we do it to ourselves. If you repeat, all right, and it's not working that well, is only going to get a sore head. 5 seconds. What other options do I have? It will always be more productive and successful and yield more successful outcomes for you if you can make yourself in the moment focus on the present only. Now only. That's where a little bit of work later on mindfulness as part of this series is going to come in very handy. Now, I've also said many, many times, and I believe it firmly, but I believe it from experience, having to bump my head on it. All right, never go to fear. As soon as you have a fearful experience in yourself, stop. Do not take another step. All right, always go to facts. Always go to facts. You don't know what the facts are? Who knows the most about this? There's all kinds of bad advice out there, but there are all kinds of really seriously exemplary sources of free information as well. Don't expect yourself to know all the answers just because it's your life. Now, I could bore you with the inventors of CBT. I can do that. Okay. I'm going to spare you that. I'll just give you both their names in case you're interested. All right. So if you're interested, you can look them up. The first was Albert Ellis, Ellis, and the second one was Aaron Beck, Beck. Now, eons ago, the 50s and 60s, but a good idea endures. And these bodies of work and research that Ellis and Beck did separately, some bright light later on has taken both and has combined them into what has turned out to be a really useful tool. So let's start with 3 types of negative thinking, because that's generally where problems start. The first way to have negative thinking and thoughts, ideas, is about ourselves personally. I want you right now, please, to write down 2 negative thoughts about yourself. Everybody has them, people. Everybody has them. I have them. You have them. 2 negative thoughts about yourself. The second way to have negative thoughts is about the world. We have no shortage of negative thoughts about the world currently. Can you write down at least 2 negative thoughts about the world? Okay, people are looking up. Third way to have negative thoughts and ideas is about the future. What would be your biggest negative thought or idea about your future? Now, if you think about any one of those 3, have you ever felt that you couldn't control your thoughts? They just come to you. And when they come to you, they just seem to run away with you. It's kind of a funny, it's not so funny, not funny, haha, funny, weird, not funny, haha. That the negative thoughts seem to have a whole lot more power to do that. They just continue to flow and they magnify, and before you know it, you're in a sweat. Right? You ever notice that? Now I want you to ask yourself, what thoughts preempted other thoughts? Preempted just means knock them out of the way, to the degree that that prevailing thought that repeats itself that you wrote down almost feel like automatic thoughts. And as they become automatic thoughts, they become habits. 5 seconds. Put yourself on pause. What other options do I have? Because when things become habits, they become so powerful that they invade and they occupy, they bully any other option that could be present in our thinking. They take up all the space and they're bullies. They get there first. And all the space belongs to them. Almost like we sift things through negative thoughts. That's the negative bias. Okay? That's not a good thing. There are positives and negatives in this world. What other options do you need to entertain? Because when we start to sift things through that, the negative thoughts, the negative bias, we start to hold those 3 areas, all 3 areas, as negative. What a recipe for depression. What a recipe for anxiety. And no one thing can be the whole truth. That's what I'm trying to get you to understand. No matter how badly you feel right now, no matter how stuck you feel right now, you're missing something. There are other options, and they belong to you too. CBT is a great alternative. Even if you can't afford to work with a therapist, or you don't have the time or access for one, self-guided CBT can be a very, very effective treatment for the most common mental health challenges. But know this, CBT isn't magic. You need to work it. You need to be willing to work it. All right? Because it will ask you questions. Then you need to answer those questions as truthfully as you're able to in the moment. It's a process that slows us down, all right, so that we can find ourselves. How many people here today would really like to be able to increase their ability to find themselves? Find yourself. Okay. Because when you can find yourself, you've got a strategy to back out of automatic thoughts. They'll still come. They're the invaders. Until you break the habit, they'll be the first guy there. But you can back out of the automatic thoughts. And that will help you prevent doing, but it will also allow you to undo whatever damage you do to yourself by pessimism, by guilt, shame, fear. And how many people here would like by 3 months from now to be feeling at least 10% better? It's not a magic bullet, but you know what? It is very effective. All right. So CBT will give you the ability to challenge the moment. It will give you the ability to challenge what is happening to you right now. All right. And it will give you the ability to get yourself back on track a whole lot faster and maybe not to be pulled off of track if you give yourself those 5 seconds. Okay. So it does require practice, however, and we're going to start that next week. Now, here's what I want you to watch in the upcoming week. Get your pens and paper, please. I'm going to read it very slowly. What we tell ourselves about what's happening in our lives makes a substantial, capital letters, substantial difference to our mood. What we tell ourselves about what is happening in our lives. The truth, but the whole truth, the considered truth, makes a substantial difference to our mood. And what that means is we have the ability to influence the mood we end up in. The mood doesn't have to. If you have formed the habit of letting the mood overtake you, and then you're basically held hostage for the day, whatever period of time it's going to hang around, you have the ability to influence that and back out of that mood. End up taking control, more control. All right. Total control? No, that would be a fallacy. Influence, major influence. Yes. Even once it's upon you, working your way backward. All right. CBT is based on the idea that our thoughts, which are also called, fancy word, cognitions, our feelings, our behaviors, are all closely intertwined. One pretty much leads to the other. By learning to challenge unhelpful thoughts, we can make ourselves feel better. We can choose healthier behavior choices. We can actually be more aware that there are other behavioral choices. Sounds like a winning proposition to me. And it's not delusion. You're not pretending. These are other options that are also present at the same time you go down the chute to negative bias. Okay? If I haven't said it enough, I'll say it again. This self-help strategy is not second best. And here's the reason it's not second best. Because it's always with you. When you learn it, it's always with you when you need it. You might want to consider keeping notes and tracking your use of these strategies, maybe a little bit of a daily diary, just to track it, because it can get lost in the busyness of life. And maybe making note of the differences in what you did allow yourself to choose to do as a result of what? Considered, that's a big word in my vocabulary, considered thoughts, rather than opting or just getting overwhelmed by automatic thoughts. Automatic thoughts are not your choice. They're the invaders. They're the first to arrive, largely because you formed a habit. So stay tuned for next week when we work on how to engage using CBT strategies. And in the meantime, you might want to have a look at the two handouts that I've given you in the past. One is the 4-question cheat sheet. Why me? Why now? What is maintaining the problem? What is preventing it from being resolved? That's the 4-question cheat sheet. Why me? Why is this happening to me? Why is it happening now? What is maintaining this situation that I don't want, this problem? And what is preventing it from being resolved? There's another little 4B question that I like to tag on. When I get there and I still feel justified, all right, because I'm really engaged in whatever this is, and we all do this. The other thing I like to ask myself is, in what part am I playing in keeping it from being resolved? Because if I have a problem, it's because I'm part of the problem. Not always the easiest thing to hear, but it's true. Okay. Now, the other thing, do you remember the bubbles? Do you remember the bubble handout? Okay. If you look at your bubble sheet, your bubble handout, as soon as you get to feelings, as soon as you engage in the feelings and you're really in the feeling moment of this process, you have now just added a ton of concrete to the behavior choice you're going to choose. Do you know what I mean? What I mean is that feelings create synapses, cross synapses, they create hormonal balance in your body. You now have an army that is working against you being able to just stay in the moment. Really watch your feelings. Feelings aren't facts. They are to be recognized, they are to be respected, but they are not always to be followed. Your feelings define where you are. They speak to who you are, and maybe they speak to how you've been hurt in the past or how you've hurt yourself. All right. And so they're to be respected. They're honest, but they're not facts. Okay. CBT is going to help you to reorient your thinking. It'll give you something to do that's productive in those 5 seconds. Right? Okay. Remember, by the time you get to feelings, all right, you're pretty much on a freight train someplace you may not want to go. All right. You've largely determined what the behavior is going to be that you'll choose. So, a little hint, stop yourself before you invest in the feelings. Don't invest, let them be, but don't invest in them. Based on the meaning that you're applying to whatever the event is. Don't be so quick to apply the meaning. Because that meaning and your feelings are prompting you to consider what you will choose to do about it and consider or not consider other options. I personally believe that there are probably 6 good ways to deal with anything. Be adventuresome. Try a new recipe. Try a new recipe. You might like it and it might work better for you. So I'm going to see you next week.